I was born in Chile. Can give you a little bit more of a backstory there. Moved here to the States in 94. So I've been in this country, I think this year will mark 30 years. Being a migrant has played heavily into my story of self and into the art that I make. And queerness and transness definitely in there as well, especially in the last decade. I am back in Florida at the moment. I've been traveling around for a bit the last few years. And yeah, trying to survive, hopefully at some point thrive. They, them.
They them. I love to ask folks, but I want to ask you this first though. How did being undocumented or moving into this country and from Chile, how did that shape your gender journey?
Mm. Um, it's interesting. I don't know if gender necessarily came into play right off the bat. By the time I had moved here, I think I had just turned 5. So I was tiny, tiny. And I think any conception of gender for me was over my head. And in fact, at the forefront of my mind, probably up until my early teens, which would put me in middle school, was always status, like immigrant status, how to be able to navigate the world in a way that was safe, that wouldn't put me or my family in jeopardy. The jeopardy being getting deported. And so navigating the school system um, in ways that wouldn't flag us as undocumented, which is kind of scary because there's so many things that could be asked of you, specifically your social security number. And like, yeah, as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, that's a lot of work. That's usually adult work. So yeah, it wasn't until probably late middle school that I think there was a sense of safety established for me, where I could think beyond status and more so focus on like, okay, what are these feelings that I'm feeling regarding people and regarding my identity? So I think by that point, hormones and all the things were kind of raging and crushes started to arise. And then feeling a little dysphoria, not having the word for it, like those feelings started to arise. In terms of how migrant had played into that, I don't know if it clicked until later on, like that there would be intersections. So that probably didn't happen until college, when I started realizing, oh, things are intersecting. Me coming to the US as a migrant and needing safety, and then as a queer and trans person, needing safety, how do these things align? Like I started being able to connect the dots a little bit more.
I'm just wondering, and then you said earlier about being in a state of survival when you want to be thriving, and so that's a long time. If you're thinking you've been in that survival mode since being 5, and so fight or flight, right? Survival is most important, right? And so we don't think about all those other things. We just like, I want to survive, I want to live, I gotta live to the next day, I want to protect my family, and these are the things that I need to do. That's heavy
It
for a young
is.
person, right? That's a lot of pressure. And so you don't get that opportunity to actually just be a youth and to be a
Exactly.
kid, right? Because just like you say, you're put in this adult's place because you're taking responsibility as an adult. And that's rough and that's hard. And so, a lot of times folks say, "Oh yeah, I knew when I was, 3 years old," or however old we are when we get that awareness of who we are. But it's
Mm,
very different when you're just trying to survive, right? And so I'm
absolutely.
wondering just like how that would have shaped you if you weren't in that put in that predicament, right?
Mhm.
And you were able to explore who you were at even a younger age and didn't have to wait till college. Do you feel like there would be like a difference in who you are now if you had that
Mm.
time to express that as a younger child?
So it's interesting that you bring this up. A couple of years ago, my family and I were able to take our first trip back to Chile. All of us at that point had been able to change status to whether it was like a permanent resident or a citizen. So we were all able to go back together. Um, my mom, my dad, and my sister had already gone to Chile separately at different points. I was the last one. So we went, and I think before that trip, I asked myself a similar question that you just asked me. What would my life have been like had I stayed, right? Had crossing borders, crossing oceans not been a part of my life. Um, and when I finally arrived to Chile and during the duration of the stay, um, I think I would have found some sense of safety more quickly, and I would have probably been able to have taken a little bit more time to figure out what I was needing as a younger kid, right? I would have definitely had a better childhood, probably with a little less fear and anxiety. However, that alternate reality, that alternate universe, I don't know if I would have liked as much. It's hard to say because we can't necessarily live them out and try each life out. But I think having stayed in Chile would have brought its own set of complications, particularly around queerness and transness. I think having had the privilege of growing up here in the States, and this is just my own experience, I'm sure that other folks who are migrant or also Chilean migrants may have like a different feel around it. But at least for me, um, I I feel like weirdly, I say this I say this with the caveat of like we're about to enter another 4 years of like a fascist regime. So there's that. But up until then, even with all the fuck shit things that are happening with like the politics in our nation, I feel a bigger sense or a better sense of safety and community here in the States than I think I would have found in Chile. Um, there's more visibility and representation, words that I don't like to throw out because I feel like they're thrown out all the time. But I definitely believe it's true that there is a lot more visibility and representation in the United States and intentionality when it comes to any theme that intersects with queerness and transness that I think is still, that conversation is still developing in Chile. Um, so yeah, I feel my life in many ways as crappy as it was to grow up in the States as a kid without documents. I prefer who I became here than who I could have become there. Um, so I still sit with that because it feels weird. It feels like icky. But yeah, I think I'm coming to terms with even if there's a bunch of what ifs, I'm happy with this reality and I'm happy that uh migranthood allowed in some ways, like it allowed me to shape um my thought process and thoughtfulness around identities, something I would not have had in Chile. I don't know if I would have been as thoughtful or as critical or would have had the analysis that I have now.
You know, was when I'm thinking and I'm listening to you and like, you know, enough not enough folks, at least I don't know, because you do this work, right, where you share folks' story,
Mm,
immigrant stories, right? And so it's kind of like I think the reason why people choose to come here, right, is that they want their children to be safe, right? They want their children to have a life and have a future different from where they come from, right? And so it's like this idea of like that's if you think of what the United States is supposed to stand for, not always what is represented once you're actually fucking here. It's just this freedom, right? To do everything that you just said to do, right? To live your life, to raise your children, supposedly in a safe environment, right? To be able to think differently and move differently and have this idea of who you are as a person. And it's
mm.
so sad that with the politics now is like what this place is supposed to represent. And I hate that phrase of making it great again, right? What who the fuck was it great for?
Exactly. And who the fuck gets to say what's great, right? Who do we listen to for that?
Right.
So
And who said it was ever great in the first place? I mean, right? It depends on who's telling the
put
story
in
and who's
charge.
listening.
Exactly.